Hey guys. All right. In this video, apparently I was a little over ambitious saying what we covered in the last video, so I'll be a little bit less over ambitious, more realistic. I don't know what the appropriate phrasing is in this one. So we'll definitely be covering stress, how it affects our health, and how we can effectively deal with stress. Um, in the last video, we talked about what stress is uh, and how our bodies respond to stress and the general adaptation syndrome that was developed to help to see how our bodies do react to stress. So let's move forward, right? And let's start to distinguish between the adaptive elements of stress, right? Because like, why do we feel stress at all, right? There must have been some evolutionary explanation, right, as to why we feel stress in some ways, and then but also tie that to the difference between um, stress from really like an evolutionary perspective, and then stress and chronic stress that we might be dealing with in today's world. So let's go back into hunter gatherer times. That we know the importance of stress, right? Just think about what we're talking about when we talk about sympathetic activation, nervous system activation, right? That's an important function, right? It takes the extra energy to our muscles and brain to help us deal with something in our environment, right? There's an emergency that we have to deal with, so our bodies have a mechanism to divert energy to those parts of the body that will use that energy most effectively. Um, the EEA stands for the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness, which is basically like what the world is like when we were evolving. Um, uh, so in this situation, right, if you think back to like our ancestral past, back before civilization and those kinds of things, then a stressor was basically like there's a predator near you and you need to get out of there. Um, or you have a conflict with another group of humans, right, as you're kind of hunting and gathering, and that causes, right, some sort of immediate need, right? But basically, our bodies learned how to adapt to serious but short-term stress, right? That's kind of how our bodies have evolved to deal with that. But in the modern world, right, stress is a lot different. There's practical stressors, right? Things about providing money, or having enough money to survive, and how do you get the right job, and what to study in college, and then social stressors, right? That you have fights with your friends or your parents or other family members. There's other The difference is that now our stress is prolonged, right? It's not no longer are we really too concerned about that predator, um, or like being in an actual battle, right, to the death. If you're in the military, obviously that's different, but most people no longer have these acute stressors in their lives. We now have these more long-term stressors in our lives, these more chronic conditions, which is sad because our bodies haven't had the time to adapt to the chronic presence of stress in our lives. Our bodies still basically treat that pop quiz that is announced at the beginning of a class as an immediate threat to your survival, which clearly it isn't. It's just a pop quiz, but that's how our bodies respond, right? And then as things build and build and build, we just don't know how to react. Our bodies are just kind of in a constant state of stress, and that's really, really bad for our health because, as we can see, right, some of the short term effects that we need when dealing with an immediate um, what's it called? An immediate stressor, right, or an immediate threat, right? Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, breaking down proteins for energy, not worrying about digestion, growing, reproduction, right? Diverting energy away from those things because they're more long term, and increasing the energy in the things that give us, that or sending resources to the things that give us energy in the short term, have these long term effects, right? That the constant increased heart rate due to stress leads to heart disease. Constant increased blood pressure leads to hypertension and the hardening of the arteries. We talked about immune depletion last time during the exhaustion stage, right? These are things that happen um, due to long-term effects of stress. So while we've adapted really well to dealing with short-term stressors, these long-term effects show that our bodies are really bad at handling chronic stress, right? And it can lead to life-threatening things. There's a reason why people who are stressed have heart attacks, right? Because it increases the likelihood of these things happening. And if you're chronically stressed, right, if you're always kind of in that resistance stage, then that's where you're going to have these long-term effects, right? That these physical health problems result based off of our body's response to stress. So when we look at both, if you remember from the last video, the sympathetic nervous system activation, right, or the SAM, or the hormonal and hypothalamus pituitary response, right, the more endocrine system response, they both have complex effects on our immune system. Some of those are some aspects of immune functioning are enhanced during these brief bursts of stress, right? Our bodies kind of respond quickly, but over time, right, over the long term, we see that our immune system functioning goes down. So this data was taken with college students, looking at how they were before an exam, right? Before taking a final. And just a quick reminder for those of you thinking like, wow, what's one test? Although you do get stressed with that. Remember that in college, right, you might have 2 or 3 tests in a whole semester. So these tests could be 30 or 40% of your grade. So the stress going into the 2 weeks prior, right, and then looking at immune system responses, we see that there's a big drop in those people that have high anxiety levels, right? Whereas 2 months before the exam, after the exam, not so much of a difference, not so much of a drop. Although you will notice that there is slightly lower immune system responses for people who have high anxiety. So when we see this, right, we know that as we get closer to that stressor, right, as stress goes up, the immune system drops. That leads to increased likelihood of getting sick. And I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever been sick, like leading up to an exam, that just adds even more stress, right? Stress goes up even more because you're not feeling well, and that can then decrease your immune system response again, leading you to stay sick and not really be in a spot to get any better. The other thing we see is that as stress interferes with sleep, which we know that it does, right? If you've ever stayed up worrying about something, you know that stress interferes with sleep. And we know that sleep disruption can lead to a lot of other issues, especially things like obesity. We talked about that motivation, right? That if you're tired, if you're chronically sleep deprived, then you're craving foods that are high in fat and high in carbohydrates. So one of the things that we see, again, over time, is that chronic stress leads to a decrease in sleep, which then increases your likelihood for obesity and all the range of illnesses that come with that. So when we look at people who've had, an average of 5.5 hours of sleep versus 8 hours of sleep over a long, period, you see a couple things, right? So when you look at these people who are actually trying to lose weight, right? Like they're dieting, they're watching their weight, they're trying to do these things. When you look at the people who got 5.5 hours of sleep, you see that they do lose weight, right? Body fat loss does happen. There's a change in weight. But then when we look at the lean body mass loss, right? Those are the things, the lean muscle mass, those things that we need, just for functioning in life. That's where a lot of the weight loss comes from, right? So we see that hey, 5.5 hours of sleep, people lost even just a little bit more weight than people who got full night's sleep. But if we look at what type of weight is being lost, right, that's a big difference, right? So instead of losing the body fat that people on diets tend to want to lose, they're losing the lean body mass, keeping the body fat, and basically not really ever getting the health benefits of losing weight, right? Those who are sleep deprived lose more muscle and bone tissue over body fat than people who get a full night's sleep. So stress is so bad for us, right? We obviously, it feels bad. It has these long-term effects. So we really should take some time talking about how do we effectively deal with stress, right? When we are stressed, what are the things that we can be doing to decrease that so that we don't have these long-term health effects? And first is we should talk about resilience, right? This is a word that gets used a lot, especially socially now. Um, People who are resilient are studied and all of these things, right? But resilience is really the ability to adapt to life's challenges in positive ways. So another way to say this, and it's just used in this graph, is hardy, right? People who are resilient, right? They're kind of hardy. They're able to deal with life's challenges, um, perceived stressors as more of an opportunity than a negative thing, right? So if we go back to that motivation thing, right? I remember on test day, some of you guys were like amped up to take the test, and you were trying to be motivated to see the test as an opportunity as opposed to a scary, threatening thing. So those people who are more resilient tend to see these stressors as like growth opportunities as opposed to threats. And then because of that, they have a higher sense of personal control over the outcome, meaning they're more likely to, not survive, it's going to survive a test, but, thrive in those conditions. So as a result, those resilient people cope more effectively with the stressful situations. The implications extend even into physical health, right? This study that we have the graph on the screen found that high hardiness college students, right? So in other words, the more resilient college students did not show the increase in health complaints during finals week, right? As compared to the low hardiness, right? The people who are less resilient. So during times of like during finals week, people who were more resilient weren't going to the student health center, weren't getting sick, weren't having these negative effects. That their mentality that, hey, this is really a challenge and I can't wait to meet it. They people with that mentality have a greater resilience, right? And think about that for a second. This is a quick aside. Who determines how you view the stress, right? Who determines what you do with the stressor? You have that test, you have that pop quiz. You do, right? You determine how your body's going to respond or how you're going to mentally respond to that. So understanding that you can kind of control how you react to stress, and then that control actually decreases those long-term stress responses, right? If you look at stressors as opportunities as opposed to stressors, then you actually lose a lot of that negative stress. Our body just responds to it differently, right? It doesn't see it as stress anymore. It sees it as an opportunity. Um, so there's a little PSA about for cognitive, what we'll talk about later, cognitive therapy, right? Reframing how we view things. But that's a teaser for like a month and a half from now. But let's talk about, all right, you're in the moment, right? Stress just pops up. What do you do, right? Yeah, reframing how you look at it is important, but sometimes that's really hard to do, especially in a moment of high stress. So there's a number of different types of coping mechanisms that we're going to talk about here. Really, there's three. First is emotion focused coping, right? That's the first one to talk about. The aim here is to improve someone's emotional state without actually ever really dealing with the stressor itself. So emotion focused coping can be negative, right? That can be a bad thing if someone turns to like alcohol or drugs, right? You see this in movies and the media, right? Someone's having a really bad day, so they need to have a drink just to kind of take the edge off. Right? But that's not ever really addressing the thing that's causing their bad day or causing their stress, right? It's just alleviating the symptoms, not the cause. Now that can be helpful, right? If it's a healthy thing, right? If you I'm really stressed, thing that always makes me feel better is to go take a walk. Then that's also emotion focused coping, right? You're not dealing with the stressor, right? You're not dealing with the thing that's causing you stress, but it's a more positive way to just not be so consumed by it, right? Um, One of the things that you take a walk, play some music, listen to music, right? Even just listening to music can sometimes lift our moods, and it helps. It doesn't, like I said, eliminate the stress or eliminate the thing that's causing the negative thing. It just makes us feel better, and when we feel better, we don't have those negative side effects of stress. Maybe that allows us to then do that reframing that I talked about on the last slide, right? That allows us to then try to look at things as more of an opportunity as opposed to a threat. The next type of coping is called problem focused coping. This one differs from emotion focused coping in a very obvious way, in that you're actually fixing the thing that's causing you the stress. You try to solve or improve the problem that's impacting you and is the stressor in your life. So, perfect example: you're driving to school, you get a flat tire. Oh my God, what do I do? Right? That's a stressful thing. Yeah, you could just sit in your car and blast music and feel better about it, but you're still going to have a flat tire in 20 minutes. Problem focused coping is, get out, change the tire, get on with your day, right? Fix the problem that's there. The important thing here, though, is to know what are the things that you have control over, what are the things that you don't, right? When do I try to solve the problem? Like, that could be even more stressful if it's like a chronic problem that exists, whether societally or within, your family or something like that. So problem focused coping can be extremely helpful, but only when it is something that can actually be improved, right? You having the pop quiz, how do you solve that, right? You take the quiz, but that's not something that you can then really fix, right? Um, so you have to be kind of smart in terms of which type of coping mechanism you use. And then the last thing that we should mention is relationship focused coping. So this is where we turn to our close knit communities, our close knit family members and friends for support in times of stress. Right. These are the people you talk to when you're dealing with issues, and evidence suggests that even when our close friends and family or in confidants or whomever that we're sharing these things with can't offer practical support, right? They can't fix it for you. Um, just knowing that you have someone there to talk to, that those close relationships actually can help alleviate those stress responses, both in the short term and the long term, when we deal with stressful situations. This is why you see people with emotional support animals, or even just pets in general, right, have stress protective benefits because you feel that love and support, and it makes you feel better and less stressed. Um, so, uh, those are really the three types: the emotion focused coping, which is just kind of dealing with how you're feeling about the stressor, but without actually dealing with the stressor itself. Problem focused coping is solving the thing that's causing you stress, if that's possible, right? That can cause more stress if it's not something that you can solve. And then relationship focused coping, which is relying on your support system that you have. Again, even if they can't offer you any support, or not any support, sorry, even if they can't offer you any solutions, that still helps you alleviate stress when you know that you have people in your life that you can talk to. Um, which is actually I think this is a good place to stop here. And I'll just throw out a little reminder that if you guys are dealing with stress, especially during this crazy time, my door is always open if you need someone to talk to, just to even vent, or whatever it is that you might need. Please know that you guys have a support system at Holy Ghost. Whether it's me or other teachers or Dr. Pollock or anybody, please know that you have people there. And that's one of the reasons why we emphasize strong community and brotherhood and all that stuff, is it really can help alleviate stress in the bad times. Okay, so this video we talked about the short-term and long-term health effects of stress. We talked about how to cope with stress, and then the next video we'll be talking about the relationship between psychology and health, and probably even get into positive psychology too. Guys, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.